Hello, and welcome back to the Growth Vantage Podcast. My name is Garrett Vita, and I'm your host. If you're an investor or you're an entrepreneur, then you're bound to run into escalation problems in communication. It's not what we intend to, but sometimes it happens, and it's so important for us as entrepreneurs, as leaders, to be able to have the tools and the knowledge to be able to de-escalate those situations so that we can solve the issue in order to get to the goal that we are trying to go for. And so I'm going to go over a few strategies or tips that have helped me de-escalate some situations. First one I've learned is to ask a question and give two options. Usually in communication, there's multiple parties, person A and person B. Usually in escalation problem, people are usually making commentary at each other. This person saying that, the next person is gonna react to that and say something else, and then the other person will say something else in return. Our brains are functioned and are so used to that, and so in a scenario that did as a nurse, I knew the patient was a little more hot-headed, so I knew that I couldn't do the normal commentary because I knew I had a higher probability of her blowing up even more, and so I asked her a question and gave her two options. I do that for a few reasons. One, I want to stun the brain, a pattern disruption. It actually forced her to stop and think. That's so important because when people are in these high intensive modes, they don't really think rationally, they think more emotionally. By asking a question, it triggers the brain to, hey, there's a question, you need to answer it. It's so funny how our brains work is that no matter what scenario you're in, when someone asks a question, your brain's already triggered to answer that question. And so in those escalation moments, the easy way to get them on task with you is start with a question. And subconsciously also shows them, hey, I'm trying to understand more of you. We're on the same team here. And that's just really just the beginning of that part. And the next part is that you want to give two options. Usually, these parts are usually more emotionally intensive, more buy-in. And so when they're having so much to think about things, it's harder for them to really think because they're at a high state already. It's so hard for people that are not used to that kind of stress to be able to make decisions promptly in a variety of options. So that's why I give two. It's either this or that. I'm going to give you the scenario that happened, and I'll share with you a little bit more about it. So I was working as a nurse, and this patient I knew that was hot-headed, I was talking about earlier, and so I called her, got the data I needed, gave it to the doctor. Doctor gave me the notes of her assessment as well as her recommendations. So all I had to do was literally just read off the page, tell the patient what the doctor said about the assessment and her recommendations. So I'm doing that. I'm telling their assessment, and then when I'm actually not even midway into the recommendations, she just blows up on me. And I'm there thinking like, oh my goodness, what is she getting mad at me? I haven't finished the recommendations, and that's the most important part. She starts rambling, and then I let her ramble just for a little bit, and all of a sudden I politely cut her off because I knew that like I had to get some kind of pattern disruption in. So I asked her a question: are you mad about the diagnosis or the recommendations? And so she stood there thinking about it. And then she answered me. Why when she stopped and say, oh, great, I knew I had her back on track because I knew she wasn't thinking logically at all because she was just being reactive to it. And then once I explained to her, like, what the important thing to focus on during that situation was about the recommendations, she was getting emotional because she was not happy about the assessment, when in reality, assessment is just a bunch of words on a document that I just read. The important part was the recommendations, and so once I explained to her that after, then she was able to really, okay, here's what we're doing. I don't need to get mad. And so that really helped to de-escalate a really easy probability of going higher down really quick. Another thing I like to do in intense emotional escalation communication is I'll wait for, I guess depending on how long it is. Sometimes I'll try to wait at least 10 seconds or until the person responds. Reason why I do this is because I'm doing it for a few reasons. Usually in communication and escalation, there's some kind of back and forth, right? A, B, A, B. And so sometimes when person A responds back to person B, person A interrupts person B and starts rambling. So there's still more gas in the tank. And so the reason why I pause is because I want that tank to fill out as much as possible. Because I want to better understand what she's saying. And sometimes all she needed was a breath in order to say more. So I want to stay quiet and to see if she's going to say anything more. And that can help me better understand the situation. And there's more context clues that I can really better communicate in the next steps after. Another thing that's why it works well is because most people don't and are not used to the awkward silence. That serves as a pattern disruption as well, because you're so highly emotional, you're just like, oh, I need to answer. And so it's going to it forces them to really say something more. Keep talking. And then soon enough, they get tired at some point in time. And so that's when you're able to like, hey, we can get on the same page now. And then that helps you to really understand like what the situation is going as well. Remember, just because there's an escalation does not mean you cannot be effective in it. So remember, ask 2 questions, take a pause, or take a really long pause until they start talking. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.